On the evening of my 70th birthday, I sat alone at a table set for 3 in the fanciest restaurant I'd ever been to in my life. And in my purse, I had a cashier's check for $1 million, a gift meant to change the lives of my 2 children. The children who had just sent me a group text message to say they were so sorry, but they had to cancel because their father's new wife was throwing them a surprise welcome home party from their trip to Italy. Hi everyone. My name is Clara, and some of you know me as Grandma Clara here on the channel. I'm speaking to you from, well, to be honest, I'm speaking to you from a hotel room. It's a very nice hotel, the kind I would have never dreamed of staying in just last week. But it isn't home. As of right now, I'm not quite sure where home is. This isn't a story that I've held on to for years. This wound is fresh, raw, and still bleeding. It happened just 2 nights ago. My children, my son, and my daughter don't know the whole story. They have no idea what was in my purse that night. They just know they canceled on their old mother's birthday. They think the worst they did was hurt my feelings. They have no idea that in that one casual text message, they didn't just cancel a dinner. They threw away a future. They threw away a lifetime of my love and sacrifice, all gift-wrapped and tied with a bow. The shame of being so completely, so thoughtlessly discarded. It's a physical weight. I feel like I can't quite catch my breath. Before I unpack this suitcase of a story, I need to ask you for a moment of your time. It takes a strength I didn't know I had to sit here and admit what happened. So please, if you would, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Knowing that you are out there listening without judgment, it feels like 1,000 hands on my back, holding me up when I feel like I am about to crumble. Your support is my courage. Thank you. To understand why $1 million was sitting in my purse that night, you have to understand the promise I made to my husband, Daniel, on the day he died. And to understand the children who broke my heart, you have to understand their father, my ex-husband, a man who taught them that love could be bought. My story, the real story of my life's great mission, began 25 years ago. I was married to a wonderful man, Daniel. He wasn't my first husband, but he was the love of my life. He was a high school history teacher, a man who was rich in knowledge and kindness, but not in money. He was the most amazing stepfather to my 2 children, Mark and Lisa, whose own father, a wealthy and charismatic businessman named Alan, had left me for a younger woman years earlier. Daniel stepped into that role and became the father they truly needed, the one who helped with homework, who coached their little league teams, who taught them about integrity and hard work. Daniel's dream was always to provide for them in a way he never could on his teacher's salary. He had a small portfolio of stocks he'd inherited, and he managed it with the same meticulous care he put into his lesson plans. His dream was that one day, that small nest egg would be big enough to give Mark and Lisa a real head start in life, a down payment on a house, a foundation for their own families. Then he got sick. A fast, aggressive cancer that took him from me in less than a year. I remember sitting by his bedside in those final days, his hand, once so strong, feeling frail in mine. I failed them, Clara, he whispered, his voice weak. The fund, it's not enough. I wanted to give them the world. I looked at this beautiful, good man, this man who had given my children his whole heart, and I made him a promise. You did not fail, I said, my voice thick with tears. You gave them a father, and I promise you, Daniel, I will finish what you started. I will see your dream through. I will get them their world. After he was gone, I was a 45-year-old widow with 2 teenage children and a mission that felt holy. I took the small sum from Daniel's portfolio, and I took the equity from the small house we owned, and I invested it all, just as he had taught me. And then I began to work. Gosh, how I worked. For 25 years, my life was a testament to that promise. I was a secretary at a law firm during the day, a job I was good at, but it barely paid the bills. So I took a second job, and sometimes a third. For 10 years, I cleaned office buildings at night. I remember the smell of industrial-grade cleaner, the ache in my lower back, the ghostly quiet of those empty corporate hallways at 2 in the morning. I'd get home, sleep for 4 hours, and then get up to make the kids breakfast before school. When my body couldn't handle the physical labor anymore, I started a home-based business. I am, if I do say so myself, an exceptional baker. I started selling my cakes and pies to local restaurants. My days would start at 4 a.m., the kitchen warm from the oven, my hands covered in flour. I baked for birthdays, for weddings, for holidays. I poured my exhaustion and my love into thousands of cakes. And every single dollar of profit, every single penny that wasn't needed for our bare-bones survival, went into that fund. I lived like a pauper. I didn't just save money, I waged a war on spending. I never bought new clothes, instead mending my old ones until they were more patch than fabric. I never took a vacation. I never went to the movies. I drove the same 20-year-old car, a rattling old thing that my son Mark was deeply embarrassed by. My life was a series of small, invisible sacrifices. I would eat soup for dinner so my children could have chicken. I would wear a threadbare coat in the winter so they could have new boots. And I did it all with a joyful heart, because every dollar I saved, every sacrifice I made, was a brick in the beautiful house of their future. It was my secret, my purpose. And my children? As kids, they were wonderful. They were my world. We were a tight-knit trio, bound by love and loss. But their other father, my ex-husband, Alan, was always a presence in the background. He was the fun dad. While I was teaching them about budgets and responsibility, he was flying them to Disney World. While I was packing their school lunches, he was buying them the latest designer sneakers. He remarried a woman named Brenda, a woman who was as flashy and expensive as he was. Brenda wasn't a stepmother. She was a personal shopper. She taught my daughter, Lisa, about brands and status. Alan taught my son, Mark, that a man's worth was measured by the size of his bank account. As Mark and Lisa grew up and became successful adults, a subtle shift occurred. They began to see my frugal life not as a sacrifice I had made for them, but as a personality flaw. My patched clothes, my old car, my coupon clipping, it became a source of embarrassment for them. They loved me, I think, but they were ashamed of my poverty. "Mom, for God's sake, let me buy you a new coat," Lisa would say, her eyes scanning my old wool coat with a look of pity. "Why don't you let me help you invest your money, Mom?" Mark would offer, knowing full well I didn't have any money to invest. "You could be living a much more comfortable life." They had no idea. They had no idea that their poor mother, their frugal, embarrassing mother, was quietly, secretly, a millionaire. A millionaire on paper, at least. Every penny was locked away in that fund, the fund I had been building for them for a quarter of a century. It was the ultimate irony. They were ashamed of the very lifestyle that was funding the immense gift I was about to give them. The plan was perfect. For my 70th birthday, a milestone, I would finally reveal my life's work. I would take them to the most beautiful restaurant in the city, a place with white tablecloths and sparkling chandeliers, a place that represented the world of comfort I was about to give them. And there, over a celebratory dinner, I would hand them the check. $1 million. $500,000 for each of them. Enough to pay off their mortgages, to secure their own children's futures, to travel the world, to be free. It was Daniel's dream, and my promise, finally fulfilled. It was the culmination of my entire life, the grand finale of my love story for them. I booked the reservation months in advance. I bought a new dress for the first time in 20 years. The week before my birthday, they were in Italy for a lavish vacation, a gift from their father and Brenda. They promised me they would be back the day before my birthday, just in time. "We wouldn't miss it for the world, Mom," Lisa had said on the phone. "Your 70th. It's going to be so special." I believed her. I counted down the days, my heart fluttering with an anticipation so intense, it felt like I was a young girl again. I imagined their faces, the shock, the disbelief, the dawning, tearful realization of what I had done for them. I imagined their gratitude, their love. I imagined the hug that would finally make the last 25 years of backbreaking work and lonely sacrifice all worthwhile. That was the dream. But the reality was a text message. A text message that proved, in the coldest, most brutal way possible, that my ex-husband, Alan, and his shiny new wife had finally and completely won. The day of my 70th birthday dawned bright and clear, a perfect, crisp autumn day. But I woke up with a strange sense of unease. Mark and Lisa were supposed to have landed from Italy the night before, and I hadn't heard from them. I told myself they were probably just exhausted, jet-lagged. They would call. Of course, they would call. I spent the day in a state of nervous, joyful anticipation. I went to the bank in the morning. Withdrawing that much money, turning 25 years of careful, patient investment into a single crisp cashier's check, felt surreal. The bank manager, a man who had only ever seen me making small, frugal deposits, looked at the account balance with wide, disbelieving eyes. As he handed me the check, tucked into a formal bank envelope, my hands trembled. It didn't feel real. $1 million. The physical proof of my promise to Daniel. The key to my children's world. I spent the afternoon getting ready. It felt like I was preparing for my own wedding. I had a long, luxurious bath. I did my hair, taking my time to get it just right. I put on the new dress I had bought, a simple but elegant deep blue silk that made me feel, well, for the first time in a long time, it made me feel beautiful. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I didn't see the tired, overworked woman with flour on her apron. I saw a mother on the verge of completing her life's greatest work. I was just putting on my earrings, a small pair of pearls Daniel had given me for our first anniversary, when my phone buzzed. It was sitting on the dresser, and my heart gave a joyful leap. It was them, calling to say they were on their way. But it wasn't a call. It was a text message. And it was a group text, addressed to me and some of their other friends, I assume. My old tired eyes squinted to read the small screen. Hey, everyone. So sorry, made your last-minute change of plans tonight. Brenda just surprised us with a huge welcome home party at their place. Totally swamped, but so fun. We'll have to catch up with everyone soon. XOXO, Mark and Lisa. I read the message once, twice, 3 times. The words swam before my eyes, refusing to make sense. AA, change of plans. Brenda's party. Catch up soon. There was no mention of my birthday. No, so sorry, Mom. No personal message at all. I was just one of the everyones they would have to catch up with soon. The air rushed out of my lungs. The beautiful bedroom, my new dress, the pearls. It all seemed to fade to gray. I sank down onto the edge of my bed, the phone feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. A cold, sick feeling of disbelief was creeping up my throat. This couldn't be happening. They couldn't have just forgotten. My thumb, trembling, hovered over the call button. I had to talk to them. I had to hear their voices. There had to be an explanation. I pressed the button and called Lisa. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. I tried Mark. The same thing. They weren't answering. They were at a party. Their stepmother's party. On my 70th birthday, a wave of nausea washed over me. I looked at the clock. It was 6:30. My reservation at the Azure, the beautiful, expensive restaurant I had chosen so carefully, was for 7 o'clock. My inner monologue was a frantic, chaotic spiral. This is a mistake. It's a misunderstanding. They'll realize. They'll call. They'll be horrified when they remember. What do I do? Should I call them again? Should I text them? Did you forget it's my birthday? How pathetic. How needy. The humiliation was already a hot flush on my cheeks. I stood up and looked at my reflection in the mirror again. The woman who looked back at me was a stranger. A 70-year-old woman, dressed up in a brand new dress, with nowhere to go. An old fool who had just been stood up by her own children. The shame was so intense, I wanted to rip the dress off, wash my face, and crawl into bed and never, ever get out. But then, something else kicked in. A flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. A stubborn, quiet pride. I had spent 25 years of my life sacrificing every single one of my own desires for them. I had worked until my bones ached. I had lived like a monk. And this dinner, this one beautiful, elegant dinner, was supposed to be the culmination of it all. It was supposed to be for them, but it was also, in a way, for me. It was a celebration of my promise, my journey, and I would not let them take that from me. I would not let their thoughtlessness, their casual cruelty, reduce me to a weeping old woman hiding in her bedroom. With a resolve that came from some deep, forgotten well of strength inside me, I picked up my purse. I checked to make sure the envelope with the $1 million check was still inside, and I walked out of my house. The drive to the restaurant was the loneliest drive of my life. Every traffic light seemed to mock me. Every happy couple I saw walking on the street was a fresh stab of pain. But I kept going. I pulled up to the valet, a luxury I had never used before, and handed him my keys with a steady hand. Walking into the Azure was like stepping into another world. It was all low lighting, sparkling crystal, and the quiet, confident murmur of wealthy people enjoying their lives. The hostess, a beautiful young woman in a black dress, smiled at me warmly. "Good evening, madam. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," I said, my voice clear and even. "It's for 3, under the name Jennings." She looked at her screen. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Jennings. Happy birthday." She smiled. "Your table is ready. Are you waiting for the rest of your party to arrive?" The question was a direct hit, but I didn't flinch. "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "It appears it will just be me this evening." I saw a flicker of pity in her eyes, quickly masked by a professional smile. It was a look I would become very familiar with over the course of the evening. She led me through the beautiful dining room to the best table in the house, a quiet corner booth with a panoramic view of the city lights. It was a table for 4, and it felt as vast and empty as an ocean. "Your waiter will be right with you, Mrs. Jennings," she said softly, and left me alone. I sat there, in my new blue dress, my purse on the seat beside me, and I felt 1,000 eyes on me. An old woman, dressed up, sitting alone at a large table on a Saturday night. They didn't know my story. They just saw the sad, pathetic tableau. And the humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, prickling sensation all over my skin. The waiter arrived, a kind-faced young man. "Good evening, madam. Can I get you started with a drink? Some champagne, perhaps, to celebrate?" If I looked at the 3 empty place settings, at the 3 champagne flutes sparkling under the low light, and I made a decision. I was not going to be the sad, pathetic old woman in the corner. "Yes," I said, my voice stronger than I expected it to be. "I would love a glass of champagne, the best you have." For the next 2 hours, I sat there, and I performed the role of a woman who was perfectly content to be alone. I ordered a full, 3-course meal. I ordered the most expensive things on the menu, the lobster bisque, the filet mignon. I made myself savor every single bite. I looked out the window at the glittering city, and I tried to appreciate the view. But inside, I was crumbling. Every time the door to the restaurant opened, my head would snap up, my heart leaping with a foolish, desperate hope that it was them, that they had realized their mistake and had come rushing to find me. But it never was. The waiter was kind. He refilled my water glass with a quiet efficiency. The sommelier complimented my choice of wine. They were all so professional, so polite, but I could feel their pity. It was like a shroud, suffocating me. The food, as delicious as it was, tasted like ashes in my mouth. The worst part was the check. Not the one in my purse. The one the waiter brought at the end of the meal. The bill was astronomical, a sum that would have covered my grocery budget for 3 months. I looked at the total, and I thought about the thousands of cheap soupy dinners I had eaten so I could save every penny for the fund. I thought about the threadbare winter coat. And then I thought about the party. Brenda's party. I could picture it perfectly. The loud music, the expensive champagne, my children laughing and mingling, telling stories about their fabulous trip to Italy. And I knew, with a certainty that was as cold and hard as the marble floor, that not once had they thought of me. Not once had they remembered what day it was. I was a ghost to them, a forgotten chore on a to-do list for another day. I paid the bill, leaving a generous tip for the kind, pitying waiter. I gathered my purse, the $1 million check still nestled inside, a secret ticking time bomb. As I stood up to leave, the hostess smiled at me again. "I hope you had a lovely birthday, Mrs. Jennings." "Thank you," I said, and I smiled back. It was unforgettable. I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high. But as the valet pulled my rattling old car up to the curb, the contrast between the life I had just pretended to have and the one I was returning to was a physical blow. The performance was over. I was just a lonely old woman, with a car that was probably worth less than the bottle of wine I had just drunk. I got into the car, and I sat there for a long time in the darkness, the engine off. The weight of the last 25 years, the weight of that $1 million check, the weight of their betrayal, all came crashing down on me. And for the first time that night, I let myself weep. The night I drove home from that restaurant was the longest night of my life. Tears I shed in the car were not the hot, angry tears of a woman who has been wronged. They were the cold, desolate tears of a woman who has been erased. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a conflict. It was an annihilation. You cannot have a conflict with people who do not even acknowledge your existence. I got home to my small, quiet house, the house that had been the command center for my life's great mission. The new blue dress felt like a costume. I took it off, hung it carefully in the closet, and put on my old, worn-out flannel nightgown. It felt more honest. I placed my purse on the nightstand, the $1 million check still inside, a grotesque mockery of the evening's events. It was a gift with no recipient, a promise with no one to claim it. Sleep, of course, was an impossibility. I lay in bed, my eyes wide open, staring at the familiar cracks in the ceiling, and my mind played the evening's events on a torturous, endless loop. The words of the text message, the pity in the hostess's eyes, the 3 empty champagne flutes, the cheerful, oblivious sound of my children's voices in my imagination, laughing at their stepmother's party. Little by little, as the hours of the night ticked by, a new, insidious enemy began to creep into my thoughts. Self-blame. The initial shock and grief began to curdle into a bitter stew of self-recrimination. My inner monologue was a relentless prosecutor. How could you not have seen this coming? The signs were all there. The canceled visits. The shorter phone calls. The way they looked at you with that mixture of love and embarrassment. You were so busy with your mission, so focused on the grand finale, that you didn't see the real story that was unfolding right in front of you. You were a fool, Clara. A blind, sentimental old fool. Oh, when? I began to make excuses for them, a desperate, pathetic attempt to stitch the wound back together. They didn't mean it. They didn't realize how much it would hurt. They're just young and caught up in their father's wealthy, glamorous world. Brenda is so flashy, so exciting. What am I compared to that? I'm just their boring, frugal old mother. They were probably just swept away in the moment. They'll call tomorrow. They'll call, horrified, begging for my forgiveness. They'll show up on my doorstep with flowers. Waterly's kindy. I clung to that fantasy. It was the only thing that got me through the night. The fantasy of their remorse. The next day, Sunday, was a study in silence. A long, agonizing, deafening silence. The phone did not ring. There was no text message. There was no knock at the door. I spent the day in a state of suspended animation, moving from room to room, unable to settle. Every time a car drove down the street, my head would snap up, my heart leaping with that same stupid, hopeful lurch I had felt in the restaurant. But the cars always drove past. I tried to distract myself. I went into the kitchen, the room that had been the engine of my great project, and I tried to bake. I got out the flour, the sugar, the eggs. But my hands, which had so skillfully crafted thousands of cakes, felt clumsy and alien. I looked at the ingredients, and all I could see was their monetary value. $2 for the flour, $3 for the eggs. Money that could have gone into the fund. My life's work had poisoned my life's joy. I pushed the ingredients away and left the kitchen. By late afternoon, the hope had begun to fester, turning into a raw, gnawing anxiety. I couldn't stand the silence anymore. I had to know. I had to see what was so important, so all-consuming, that it had completely eclipsed their mother's 70th birthday. And that's when I made a mistake. I did something I rarely do. I went on social media. I am not a woman who lives her life online. My daughter, Lisa, had set up an account for me years ago so I could see pictures of her life, of Mark's life. I would scroll through it sometimes, a silent, invisible observer of the beautiful, happy lives my children were projecting to the world. I opened the app, my fingers feeling clumsy on the small screen of my old phone. And there it was, at the very top of my feed, a new post from my daughter, Lisa. It had been posted the night before, at the exact time I had been sitting alone in that restaurant. The picture was a large group shot, taken by a professional photographer. It was in Alan and Brenda's enormous, marble-floored entryway. There were about 30 people, all of them beautiful, wealthy, and laughing. In the center of the photo stood my children, Mark and Lisa. And between them, her arms draped possessively around their shoulders, was Brenda. She was wearing a sparkling gold dress, looking like the triumphant queen of a lavish kingdom. Mark and Lisa were beaming, their faces full of a relaxed, genuine joy that I hadn't seen in years. They looked happy. They looked like they were exactly where they wanted to be. But it was the caption that broke me. The caption, written by my daughter, was the final devastating blow. It read, "The most amazing surprise welcome home party from the best stepmom in the world. Brenda, you are a literal angel for throwing this for us. We are the luckiest kids in the world to have you and Dad as our family. #family. First #best stepmom. #making memories. They best stepmom in the world. Or now. Luckiest kids in the world to have you and Dad as our family. And #family first. And I read the words over and over, and the world seemed to tilt and slide out of focus. This wasn't a last-minute, thoughtless mistake. This was a declaration. This was a public statement of allegiance. They were publicly, joyfully, declaring Brenda and Alan as their Giriela family. And I, their actual mother, the woman who had cleaned toilets and baked cakes for 25 years to fund their futures, I wasn't even a footnote. I was an inconvenient, embarrassing old relative to be caught up with later. The hashtag, #family first, was the ultimate, cruelest irony. They had chosen their family, and I was not in it. The sentence rhythm of my thoughts became a series of short, brutal hammer blows. They didn't forget. They didn't make a mistake. They chose. They chose her. They chose the money. They chose the lifestyle. They chose everything that is not me. In that moment, sitting on my worn-out sofa, looking at a glossy, happy picture on a tiny screen, the last vestiges of the soft, forgiving, excuse-making mother died. The hope for an apology, the fantasy of their remorse, it all burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard, and utterly desolate truth. They were not the children I had raised. They were the children of the man who had abandoned me, Alan. He had finally, completely, won their souls. And Daniel's dream, the dream of giving them a world built on love and sacrifice, had been for nothing. They didn't want that world. They wanted the shiny, golden, empty world their father had bought for them. The recurring, hurtful details of the past few years suddenly snapped into focus. The embarrassment over my old car. The pitying looks at my clothes. The constant, subtle pressure to be more, to have more, to be more like them. It hadn't been a phase. It had been a slow, steady process of them divesting themselves of me, of my simple, frugal world. And the party, my birthday, had simply been the final, public act of that divestment. I closed the app. I put the phone down on the cushion beside me. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. A strange, chilling calm was settling over me. The kind of calm that comes after a hurricane has passed, when you walk out into the daylight and see the absolute, total devastation of the landscape. The old world is gone, and you have no choice but to start building a new one. I looked over at my purse, still sitting on the nightstand where I had left it. The $1 million check was still inside. My life's work. Daniel's promise. Their future. A future for two children who had just publicly declared that I was not their family. And a new question began to form in my mind. A question that was not born of grief or of anger, but of a cold, hard, and terrifyingly clear logic. What do you do with a gift when the people it was intended for no longer exist? The phone call finally came on Monday afternoon. 2 full days after my 70th birthday. I was in the kitchen, mechanically washing the few dishes I had used, when the phone rang. I saw my son's name flash on the screen, and I felt nothing. The desperate, hopeful lurch in my heart was gone. It was replaced by a cold, clinical curiosity. I let it ring 4 times before I picked it up. "Hello, Michael," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. "Mom," he said, his voice a performance of cheerful, slightly flustered relief. "Oh, thank God. I've been so worried. You weren't answering." A lie, my new, cold, logical brain noted. I hadn't called once. And danse. "I've been here," I said. "Listen, Mom, I am so sorry about Saturday," he gushed, the apology sounding rehearsed, like a speech he had practiced with his publicist. "It was just a total whirlwind. Brenda's party was a complete surprise, and we just got swept up in it. Time completely got away from us. It was awful. We felt terrible." I was silent. I let his empty words hang in the air. He was waiting for me to say, "Oh, it's okay, sweetie. I understand." It was the role I had always played in his life. The understander. The forgiver. The absorber of all hurts. My silence seemed to unnerve him. He cleared his throat. "Lisa's on the line, too," he said. "Hi, Mom." My daughter's voice chirped, equally cheerful, equally false. "Happy belated birthday. We are so sorry. We're going to make it up to you, we promise. How about we take you out to dinner this week? To the Azure, maybe. Our treat." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it almost made me laugh. They were offering to take me to the very restaurant where I had sat alone, humiliated, on my birthday. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had forgotten that they had even made a plan with me in the first place. My birthday dinner was so insignificant, so utterly irrelevant to them, that it hadn't even registered as a canceled event. It was just an empty space in their memory. And then came the line that finally, irrevocably, severed the last, thinnest thread of connection I had to the children I had raised. "To be honest, Mom," Lisa said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial, confidential tone, "it's probably for the best that it worked out this way. The party at Dad and Brenda's was, well, it was a huge networking opportunity for Mark and me. There were some really important people there. It was actually a really good career move for both of us." I could hear the smile in her voice. She wasn't just apologizing. She was bragging. She was telling me, in the clearest possible terms, that skipping their mother's 70th birthday was not just an oversight, but a good career move. She was placing a monetary value on my love, on my milestone, and she had decided that the potential for a business contact was worth more. She had learned her father Alan's lessons well. Everything, and everyone, had a price. And I, her mother, was a bargain basement commodity, easily discarded for a better offer. The cold, quiet clarity in my mind sharpened to a point of absolute certainty. The question I had been asking myself for 2 days, what do you do with a gift when the people it was intended for no longer exist, now had an answer. The children I had saved for, the children I had sacrificed for, the children who were Daniel's dream, they were gone. They had been replaced by these 2 cold, ambitious strangers on the other end of the phone. And you do not give a sacred, life-altering gift to strangers. I looked over at my purse, sitting on the kitchen counter. The $1 million check was still inside. My life's work. My promise. And in that moment, I knew, with a certainty that was as calm and deep as the ocean, that it would never be theirs. "That's very nice of you to offer, Lisa," I said, and my voice was so serene, so polite, it must have been terrifying. "But I don't think that will be necessary. I've made other plans." "Other plans?" Mark asked, confused. "What other plans?" "Just plans," I said. "Things I need to take care of for myself. You two sound very busy. I won't keep you." "But Mom, we feel awful," Lisa insisted, the performance of remorse continuing. "Don't," I said, and for the first time, a sliver of the ice in my voice must have been audible, because they both went silent. "There's no need to feel awful. You made a choice. It was a good career move. I understand perfectly." And then I said the words that would mark the beginning of my new life. "You know, I need to go. I have a phone call I need to make to my financial advisor." "Your financial advisor?" Mark asked, a hint of amused condescension in his voice. "Mom, you don't have a financial advisor." I smiled then, a small, secret smile that they couldn't see. "Oh, that's where you're wrong, my son," I said softly. "It turns out I do. Goodbye, Mark. Goodbye, Lisa." And before they could respond, I hung up the phone. I had not been erased. I had not been abandoned. I had just been liberated. And I was about to make the single most important financial decision of my entire life. In that moment, hanging up the phone on my own children, I did not feel a single pang of sadness or regret. The woman who had wept in her car 2 nights ago was gone. The woman who had lain awake, torturing herself with self-blame, was gone. The grief, the hurt, the love, it had all been burned away in the fire of their casual, calculated betrayal, leaving behind something I hadn't felt in 25 years. Myself. My awakening was not a loud, dramatic event. It was a quiet, profound, and irreversible shift in my own soul. I looked around my small, humble house, the house my children were so ashamed of, and I saw it for what it was, a cage. A cage I had built for myself, bar by frugal bar, sacrifice by sacrifice. I had been living like a ghost in my own life, a silent, invisible engine funding a future for 2 people who had just publicly declared that I was not their family. The promise I had made to my dying husband, Daniel, echoed in my heart. I will get them their world. I had kept my promise. I had worked, I had saved, I had built them their world. But the children I had promised it to no longer existed. They had been replaced by 2 strangers, 2 people who valued a good career move over their own mother's heart. And you do not give a world to strangers. My fight back wasn't a plan for revenge. I had no desire to hurt them, to make them suffer. That would require an emotional connection I no longer had. No, this wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. It was a plan for reclamation. It was time to reclaim the life I had so willingly, so foolishly, put on hold for a quarter of a century. My first act was a simple one. I walked to my nightstand, took the $1 million check out of my purse, and I looked at it. A lifetime of 4 a.m., baking sessions, of lonely nights cleaning empty offices, of patched clothes and soupy dinners, all condensed into a single piece of paper. I took a deep breath, and I ripped it in half. Then I ripped it into quarters, and then into tiny, confetti-sized pieces that fluttered down into the wastebasket like snow. It was the most liberating, the most powerful, the most joyful act of my entire life. I was not destroying a gift. I was destroying my cage. My second act was to find a new financial advisor, myself. I took the folder containing all the investment statements out of the bottom of my sock drawer, where I had kept it hidden for years. I spread the papers out on my kitchen table. For 25 years, I had done exactly what Daniel had taught me. Invest in slow, steady, reliable funds, and never, ever touch the principal. I had looked at the bottom line, the total, but I had never really looked at the details. Now I did. I spent the next 2 days reading. I went to the library and took out books on finance, on retirement planning, on wealth management. I discovered that I was a natural. The same meticulous, patient attention to detail that made me a good baker also, it turned out, made me a good investor. I saw how the money had grown, compounded, blossomed under my quiet, steady stewardship. It was a beautiful, thriving garden that I had planted and tended, but had never allowed myself to enjoy. That was about to change. My third act was the beginning of my new life. I went online, and I looked up real estate. Not in my small, boring town. I looked up real estate in the most beautiful place I could think of, a place Daniel and I had always dreamed of visiting, but could never afford. A small, coastal town with white sand beaches and a sky that was always blue. I found a small, perfect condominium for sale. It had a balcony that overlooked the ocean. I called the real estate agent. I called my bank. I began the process of liquidating a small portion of the fund, my fund, and buying my freedom. I sold my house, the house that was a monument to my sacrifice, in 2 days. I sold my rattling old car. I packed 2 suitcases with the few things I cherished. My photographs, Daniel's old books, my mother's favorite recipe box. And I left. I didn't tell a soul where I was going. I just disappeared. The consequences for my children were quiet. They didn't come in the form of a dramatic, tearful confrontation. They came in the form of a slow, creeping, and utterly baffling silence. They called me, of course, after our last conversation. They were confused, a little annoyed. "Mom, what was that all about? Where are you? Call me back." I didn't answer. They texted. "Is everything okay? Why aren't you answering?" I didn't reply. Days turned into weeks. Their confusion must have turned to worry, then to irritation, then to a dawning, cold panic. I had been the constant, reliable sun in their universe. And suddenly, I had gone dark. The true consequences landed when the first bills they had always ignored started to arrive. The property taxes they had never thought about. The insurance payments. The life they lived, the one they thought they had built entirely on their own merits, was suddenly revealed to have been subsidized by a silent, invisible benefactor. Me. But the real blow, the one I never saw coming, and they certainly never expected, came from their father, Alan. When he and Brenda found out that my children had so publicly and cruelly ditched me on my birthday, they were furious. Not out of love for me, of course, but out of a sense of propriety, of image. It made them, and by extension, my children, look bad. It was a crack in the facade of their perfect, wealthy, happy family. Alan, a man who had never given his children anything but money, suddenly cut them off. The lavish trips, the designer gifts, the safety net of his wealth, it all disappeared. He was embarrassed by them. They had shown themselves to be what he, deep down, had always known they were: greedy, thoughtless, and cruel. They had failed the only test he had ever given them, the test of good appearances. And what did I find? I found the ocean. I found the sun. I found the profound, unshakable peace of a life that is lived for oneself. I wake up every morning in my beautiful new home, and I drink my coffee on my balcony, and I watch the waves. I've taken up painting, a hobby I had abandoned 50 years ago. I paint the ocean, the sky, the seabirds. My days are my own. They are quiet, they are simple, and they are mine. The greatest lesson I learned is that a promise to the dead should never require the suicide of the living. I promised Daniel I would build a world for my children, and I did. But they chose to leave that world. And I learned that a gift, no matter how lovingly prepared, is only a gift if the recipient is capable of valuing it. My children were not. So now, I speak to you, to anyone out there who is living their life for someone else, for your children, for your spouse, for a promise you made long ago. Sacrifice is a beautiful thing, but it should never be a one-way street. Do not ever, ever set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Because when you are nothing but a pile of ashes, they will simply walk away to find a new fire, and you will be left cold and alone in the dark. Thank you for being here, for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to share it. If this story has moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that little notification bell. And please, in the comments below, tell me one thing you are going to do, just for yourself, this week. I would love to read it. Love you all. This is Grandma Clara, and I'll see you in the next story.